Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome back to Free Real Estate Fridays. I'm so glad you could join us today. I hope you've had a wonderful week and hopefully you had time to consider some of those things that you could release into the water and let God take hold of so that you could see what He could do rather than keeping it to ourselves and maybe stagnating the opportunity there. This weekend, we get ready for a long weekend. And as we celebrate Labor Day, I just want to take a moment to thank the Lord for all that He's done for this country. The growth, the change, the building of this country that we have seen over the last 250 some years has been unbelievable. And it's because this country put God first. So I pray that we keep it that way and that He continues to bless us. Today, I want to talk to you about no regerts. Do you remember that commercial where the person was getting a tattoo and it was supposed to say no regrets, but the tattoo artist transposed two of the letters? And this is a problem, right? And it's a commercial for Milky Way. And so he just starts to eat a Milky Way like, it'll be fine, right? Well, that's a funny commercial, but regret is a real thing. And sometimes if we let it, it can really drag us down. And when I started thinking about no regrets, I really started thinking about it in terms of anyone who has followed Jesus has no regrets for doing that, right? It is the best choice they have ever made. And they don't miss the things of this world. They realize what they get because they decided to leave those behind. And it's a flawless plan. But as I was chatting with Trudy back and forth, she was looking at it from a different perspective, and she was looking at it from the point of people who had done things that they may have come to regret. And so I thought, well, why don't we talk about both of them? And so this week, we're going to talk a little bit about someone who you might find regretted their choices that they made when it came to serving God. As I began to think about people in the Bible who may have had some significant regrets, the list grew very quickly. We start with Adam and Eve, right? If they could go back and undo what they did, I'm certain that they would. The people of Noah's time who didn't jump on the ark, who didn't believe him, they came to a very severe fate because of that decision. Sarah, Abraham's wife, did not trust God's timing and so had to live forever with Abraham's son by another woman. And the list goes on and on. One of my favorite examples is Lot's wife, right? Lot's family was saved from Sodom and Gomorrah, and all God said is, don't look back, right? Don't look back. I'm giving you this opportunity. Don't look back. And she does, and she turns into a pillar of salt. So, who I'd like to focus on today, however, is King Saul. And actually, next week, we're going to focus on a different Saul. So I'm going to title this The Tale of Two Sauls. They have very different outcomes to their stories. But King Saul takes place in 1 Samuel, and as always, I encourage you to get in that book of the Bible and begin reading. My version is really like the movie version, right? All the great pieces are missing, but I'm just going to give you the overview so you can kind of see where that regret comes in for him. So in 1 Samuel, this is coming off a time where the Israelites, they came from Egypt. They were in the wilderness for a long time. There was a lot of war, a lot of oppression, a lot of disobedience on the Israelites' parts. But they hadn't had a solid ruler for about 200 years. And so during this time, Samuel comes into play. He is a great man of God. He's one of the final judges in the Israelites' world, and he is a priest. And so he is trying to guide the people, and ultimately he tries to help King Saul. But the people say, hey, we need a king. We need someone here to rule over us. And Samuel gives them this warning. Listen, you have a king, right? You have the king of the world, and you keep disobeying him. Why don't we just focus on him? But they say, nope, nope, nope. We need this person in our lives. We want a king to rule over us. And so I just want to read in 1 Samuel chapter 12, verses 24 and 25, the warning that Samuel gives to the people, because, like many books that we read, this foreshadowing is just unbelievable. And here's what it says: "Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart. For consider how great things he hath done for you. But if ye shall do wickedly, ye shall be consumed, both ye and your king." So this is a pretty big thing right here, right? But like many of us, we hear it and then it flies right out the other side. So then we get into King Saul's reign. And in chapter 13, very quickly, King Saul shows us his character. So King Saul is out and about, and all of a sudden, he decides to make a sacrifice. So here's the problem with that. In this time frame, the only person allowed to make a sacrifice was the priest. And so for King Saul to do this is really a break of the commandment that God has given him. And so he sort of puts himself above what God says and thinks that what he is doing is better. And so here in chapter 13, verse 13, Samuel says this: "And Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom of Israel forever." So it may seem like a little thing, right? But it's a very clear look into where Saul believes he falls in the hierarchy, right? Well, God said this, but I felt like I needed to do this, right? I was compelled to do this, so I did it. How often do we do the same things? God tells us, hey, you need to be over here. And we say, but I'm really feeling over here a lot more. And we are disobedient. Friends, that will lead to regret in our lives when we do not follow the course that Jesus is providing us. So then in chapter 14, we see Saul's son Jonathan come into play. And he goes to a battle and he says, listen, I think the Lord is on our side. In Jonathan's heart, it feels like he is trying to do what is right in God's eyes. And lo and behold, he wins this battle. Well, Saul is really burned by this. And he says, listen, no man eats until I get to defend myself against the enemy, right? This is about me, not about anybody else winning this battle. So he says, no one eats. Well, I love this. They start walking in the woods, and what does God do? He covers the ground with honey. Listen, you want to show God who's boss? He'll put you in your place. Now, these men, of course, are thinking, we can't touch this because our king has told us we cannot. But Saul's son Jonathan doesn't hear this command. And so he eats of the honeycomb. And when he does, he is enlightened and he sees what is going on around him and the problem that is coming into play with his father. So, of course, his father finds out that he eats this and he says, listen, you're just going to have to die. That's it. You disobeyed me. Well, the people stand up for Jonathan, and here's what it says. And the people said unto Saul, shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? God forbid. As the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground. For he wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not. No matter how big and powerful Saul thought he was, God's plan will always come to fruition, and those who are serving him will live with no regret. So then we get to chapter 15, and this is Saul's stick a fork in it moment, right? His most regrettable decision. He's had a lot of opportunity to choose to turn and follow God, and he has not. His self-importance has just really ruled over that thinking. And so in chapter 15, the Lord gives Saul a directive. Here's what it says in verse 3. It says, now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not. But slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. There is nothing to be left when they defeat this group of people. But unfortunately, again, Saul thinks he knows better than God. And in verse 9, this is what it tells us. But Saul and the people spared Agag, which is the king, and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. Here we see Saul take the pieces that he thinks are good, not what God has directed. We want to take apart what God gives us rather than accept all of what he says. God is a very all or nothing kind of God. Remember what it tells us. If we are lukewarm, if we fall in the middle, he will spit us out. Better to be cold than to be lukewarm. But instead, let's be on fire. Let's have no regrets. In this moment, when Saul disobeys God, he has sealed his fate that his kingdom is gone. It will be rent from him. He will no longer serve as the people's king. And in the next chapter, we see David come into play. And boy, if you keep reading, there are some interesting interactions between Saul and David. So I hope that you'll get in the Word and look at those. And so today, I just want you to take a few moments. And I want you to think about where you are in your life. Have you taken everything from the world, everything of yourself, and laid it behind so that you can fully focus on Christ? Because I promise, if you're just taking bits and pieces, you'll end up like Saul. You'll end up with regret. It will not work out the way that you think. But boy, if we do that, if we fully follow Christ and leave all of this world behind, leave all of our self behind, we'll have no regrets. Only the best awaits us. Dear Lord, thank you so much for our time here together. Lord, thank you for showing us how important it is to give you our all, to leave nothing to chance, Lord. You truly have our best interest at heart, and your plan is the only plan that we need to follow. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.